Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Office of Violence Against Women Outreach and Services for Underserved Populations Grant Program Fiscal Year 2024 pre-application session. My name is Betty McIntyre, and I am an Underserved Grant Manager Specialist. I also have my colleagues as part of my team here in the background. Kara, Daisy, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hello, my name is Kara Mahler, and I am one of the 3 program specialists on the Underserved program.
Hello, everyone. My name is Daisy Jones-Brown, and I'm one of the 3 program specialists on the Underserved.
Great, thank you so much. I just want to say welcome again to everybody. As we go through this presentation, this webinar, I want to make sure that there's a couple of things I want to highlight from the solicitation. Please know that not everything will be discussed in today's webinar that is contained in the solicitation, because it's not, unfortunately, there's not going to be enough time for us to go through every single thing. So I really encourage you to read the solicitation in its entirety. It does contain detailed information about eligibility, application requirements, and instructions on how to apply. Applicants are responsible for ensuring that a complete application is submitted. I will also be stopping a couple of times for questions. You can put your questions in the Q&A box, or please hold your questions at the end of each break, so we can make sure that we have everybody's questions and answers. If you still have questions after this session, please send them to the Underserved email at ovw.underserved@usdoj.gov. All right. As I said, this application pre-session is to highlight certain aspects of the solicitation. I just want to reiterate that we want everyone to read the solicitation in its entirety, and there will be questions at the end of each section. The Violence Against Women Act, Reauthorization Act of 2013 outlines the program for the outreach and services for the underserved populations, which we call the Underserved program. The purpose of our grants is to develop and implement outreach strategies targeted at victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking in underserved populations, and to provide victim services to meet the needs of those victims. Awards this year will range in the amount of $550,000 to $625,000, with death-focused projects receiving $25,000 for communication and accommodations. We anticipate 15 awards for a total amount of $9 million. And each award is for 36 months. The solicitation outlines purpose areas for this grant. I wanted to just go over these purpose areas. There are 6 of them, and you can call them purpose areas or strategies, and they are obligations stated in our statute. So the first one is working with state, local, and federal agencies and organizations to develop or enhance population-specific services, strengthening the capacity of underserved populations and traditional victim service providers to provide population-specific victim services. The third purpose area is enhancing the criminal and civil justice system response by training them about the needs and specific issues faced by victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking from underserved populations. Fifth one is working in cooperation with an underserved population to develop and implement outreach, education, prevention, and intervention about specific issues faced by victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking from underserved populations. The last purpose area is providing population-specific training to social and human services providers. The purpose areas are the things that you can do under this grant program. Please review the purpose areas carefully as they are project activities funded through the Underserved Grant Program, and they must fall under at least one of these areas. These are the types of activities that can be done as connected to the overall purpose of providing or enhancing population-specific outreach and victim services for survivors of sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and/or stalking in the targeted underserved community. Please note, if you intend to provide legal services, you will need to submit a certification. This can be found in the solicitation on page 12. So what do we mean by population-specific services and underserved populations? Well, population-specific services is defined in our statute, and it says that victim-centered services that address the safety, health, economic, legal, housing, workplace, immigration, confidentiality, or other needs of victims and services are designed primarily for and are targeted to a specific underserved population. Underserved populations are populations who face barriers in accessing and using victim services. The Underserved program has one priority area this year. The priority area is to strengthen efforts to prevent and end sexual assault, including victim services and civil and criminal justice responses. The Underserved program will give priority to applications that focus 100% on sexual assault with an emphasis on non-intimate partner sexual assault, including adult survivors of child sexual abuse. The priority area is not required, but we do encourage you to address the priority area. Remember, this is entirely optional. All right, this is the time we're going to take a quick break for some questions.
When you were reading number 3, I was reading along with it, but it seemed that you was mentioning something that I didn't see on the screen. I was asking, could you just go over that point again, number 3?
Yes, ma'am. And you're talking about the purpose areas?
Yes.
Okay, I can definitely go through the 6 purpose areas again.
Okay.
First one is working with governments, agencies, and organizations to develop or enhance population-specific services. The second one is strengthening the capacity of underserved populations and traditional victim service providers to provide population-specific victim services. Third one is enhancing the criminal and civil justice system response by training them about the needs and specific issues faced by victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking from underserved populations. Working in cooperation with an underserved population to develop and implement outreach, education, prevention, and intervention about specific issues faced by victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and/or stalking from underserved populations. And the last one is providing population-specific training to social and human services providers.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. You can go ahead and lower your hand if you have it up, Marcia. Perfect. Daisy,
Okay.
next one.
For the purpose areas, do we just need to do like a minimum of one of those activities in our proposals, or is there like, do we have to do more than one? Does that make sense?
Correct. It does make sense. So the question is, do you have to do more than one, or can you just do one? And the answer is
Yes.
you can do just one.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Betty. So we have a total of 14 questions, and I will go ahead and start asking you those.
Okay.
So the first question is, how are traditional victim service providers defined?
Great question. Traditional victim services providers in the context of this grant is non-underserved victim service populations. So the organization would be not, I'm going to stop because I want to make this very clear. We're going to be going over eligibility, so this is going to become a little bit more clear. Traditional victim services are victim services that are not specifically focused for one population. That's how we're going to define traditional services. And like I said, this will make much more sense when we get to eligibility.
And I'd like to add, there's a definition of a victim service provider that must be met. It's in the solicitation itself, if that's the question as well.
Perfect. And please read your solicitation as well. Thank you, Kara. All right. Daisy?
Hi, thank you very much. I have a really quick question. You had mentioned that priority would be given to organizations that primarily focus on, and then my screen went out.
Okay, so on the one purpose area is that the underserved program has one priority area. That's different from that is different from the purpose areas. The priority area is to strengthen efforts to prevent and end sexual assault, including victim services and civil and criminal justice responses. The underserved program will give priority to applications that focus 100% on sexual assault with an emphasis on non-intimate partner sexual assault that includes adult survivors of child sexual abuse.
Could you clarify? So you're saying preference will be given to organizations? Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I apologize, Isis. Go ahead.
Applications that primarily that serve underserved populations, but focus on victims of sexual assault. Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Daisy?
Okay. So the next question is, can you explain how this opportunity compares to the culturally specific services opportunity? And when will the culturally specific solicitation come out?
Let me answer the second part first. I do not know when the culturally specific services program grant will come out. But when it does, the solicitation will be posted on our website and will go out through grants.gov. The first part of your question is how this is different is this program, the underserved program, is specifically for those programs that do not meet the eligibility for the cultural and specific program. And we're going to go through that here in the next section.
All right. The next question is, do we need a sub-award agreement policy if the partnership is an MOU and no money is exchanged?
We're going to talk about partnerships here in a second, but yes, an MOU is required whether or not the partner will be receiving funds from the grant. I would ask questions later to the GMFD representative that will be speaking around the no funds being exchanged, but an MOU is required between the partner and the applicant. Next question, Daisy.
Yes. Do 100% of those served need to be survivors of sexual assault? If not, what is the expectation?
Your application does not have to address the priority area of sexual assault in the strengthened efforts to prevent and end sexual assault, including victim services and civil and criminal justice responses. So the expectation, I'm going to go back, is to provide services targeting outreach, education, prevention, any one of those 6 purpose areas of victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, or dating violence.
Thank you. Are there any match requirements regarding funding?
No, there is no match requirement for the underserved program.
The RFP states the notification date is the same as the program start date, October 1. No.
I don't understand.
This is Kara, if I may answer that one.
Sure.
That's notifying you that we will make all award notifications no later than September 30th, and all grants will go out with an October 1st start date.
Thank you, Kara. So the next question is, can you speak more about the stipulation regarding non-IPV services?
That is the priority area again, that we talked about here a couple of minutes ago. That is, if your application will focus 100% on sexual assault with emphasis on non-intimate partner sexual assault, including adult survivors of child sexual abuse. And what we mean by that, if this is the question, is that if your application, you choose to focus on the priority area and on sexual assault survivors, it does not mean that you cannot serve survivors of sexual assault that come from IPV, but but the emphasis of the project should be on non-intimate partner violent sexual assault, meaning non-domestic violence. There's no relationship to that, to the victim and the perpetrator. But it also includes adult survivors of child sexual abuse, which there's not an intimacy there because there's not a romantic relationship. I hope that answers that question.
Okay, thank you. Does the partner organization have to be a direct service provider?
That's an eligibility question.
That is all that's with that question.
Okay,
I'm
can you
pretty sure
repeat
the
it then?
eligibility.
Is it?
Uh,
No, that was the question, Daisy. Was that eligibility or is that just a general question? I'm sorry.
It's a general question.
Can you repeat it, please?
Does the partner organization have to be a direct service provider?
No, it does not. And we will actually go into partnership here in this next section.
Can we apply for this grant if we have much lower budgets than $550,000? If yes, what would be the lowest budget range?
Question will be where?
And I want to make sure I'm understanding this question is if the budget for your project will be, you believe will take less than $550,000, can you still apply? If that's the question, yes, you can.
That seems to be the question. Yes.
Yes, you can still apply. But the range that we will be providing for an award is anywhere from 550,000 to 625, with 25,000 of that range being for deaf-focused programs for accommodations and access.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is there a chance that sample project examples can be made available?
Kara, can you jump in on this one?
Anyone from the public has the right to request a copy of a proposal that has to be done through the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act process, which can be found on our website. But we are not allowed to, us individually cannot share information like that publicly. You have to submit a request to our legal department through the Freedom of Information Act. You need to go to the OVW website to get that information on that process.
Thank you, Kara.
Thank you. The next question is, if we are a direct service provider with at least 3 years experience, is a partner agency required? If so, what is the purpose of having this partner agency? What must that agency provide for this application program?
Another great question. I'm going to answer part of it right now. Yes, partnerships are required, even if you're a victim service agency. The rest of that question, I will answer in the partnership section in the next segment.
Okay, I still have a couple more.
Okay.
Does that imply that the IPV/DV isn't applicable unless there are at least co-occurrent violence involving DV and sexual violence? I think
you
that's
repeat the
to a
question?
previous question, so we're going to hold that one.
Okay.
I'm sorry, can I just clarify? Because I feel like I know where this is going. If you
Okay.
want to address sexual assault priority, to meet the sexual assault priority, which is optional, you have to address sexual assault beyond intimate partner violence. But any application, if you're not meeting priority area, just applying for this grant, can apply for domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and or stalking in any way that comes out. I hope that's just clear. Thank you.
So the last question is, will you be eligible to use these grant funds to use towards current work and or to expand a program that you currently have that serves this group? E.g., expand to add servicing other purpose areas.
Kara, can you help me on this one?
If you are currently serving one of the 5 eligible communities for this program, which Betty will go over in the next section, and you would like to take this grant to add on domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, or stalking, and again, remember, this grant is only to address those 4 areas. If you would like to add on to your programming through this grant, you can do that. If you're currently providing domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking services, you can also use this grant to expand those services. So you can either add on new programming or expand the programming you have. But the only way you can use this grant is to address sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, or stalking.
Thank you, Karen.
And that's it for questions, Betty.
Okay. Layla, did you have a question? I saw that you popped up on the screen. No? Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So no more questions, Daisy?
No, we can move forward. The other 3 questions we will answer at the next break.
Great. Thank you so much, Daisy.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. All right. So now we're getting to the part that everybody's here for, as we could tell from those questions, is who can apply. First off, the first thing is nonprofit, non-governmental organizations are eligible to apply. We're now going to review the second part of that eligibility. So we just talked about it has to be a nonprofit, non-governmental organization who also is either a deaf program, an organization serving underserved religious populations, a disability program, or an organization where the primary purpose of the organization is to serve certain underserved racial and ethnic populations. I'm going to go now and define each one of these. This again is included in the solicitation on page 10 through 11 of the solicitation. So what do we mean by deaf programs? These are programs run by and for deaf individuals. They are standalone deaf, domestic violence, and sexual assault victim service programs, general deaf services, nonprofit, non-governmental organization, or a deaf, domestic violence, sexual assault program housed within a hearing victim service provider. The second category is the lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans organizations. These are organizations for which the primary purpose of the organization is to serve LGBT individuals. The third eligibility category is organizations serving underserved religious populations. Organizations whose primary purpose is to serve an underserved religious population who faces barriers accessing and using services because of their religion. This category, the underserved religious populations, has been updated from previous solicitations to provide additional clarity to avoid any confusion. The fourth category is disability programs. The disability service provider organizations or victim service providers that have received 2 continuation disability grant program awards are not eligible to apply, are not eligible to apply for the disability grant program this cycle, would be considered a disability program for this grant. And the last eligibility category is the organizations where the primary purpose of the organization is to serve certain underserved racial and ethnic populations. This includes populations underserved due to special needs, such as language barriers, immigration status. The second part of this definition is that these organizations are not eligible for OVW's culturally specific service program. I want to reiterate, you're not eligible versus not awarded. So you don't have to have been denied a CSSP grant award, but it's whether or not are you eligible to apply for the culturally specific services program. If you're not, then you could potentially meet the eligibility of certain racial and ethnic organizations. So just to be clear, applicants must be a nonprofit, non-governmental organization, and they must demonstrate how they meet the eligibility definition for one of the 5 applicant types listed in the solicitation. Simply stating on your application that you are one of these categories is not sufficient. You must clearly demonstrate your qualifications of the eligibility category in the program narrative section of the application. Also, I want to just make a note that fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23 award grantees are not eligible to apply for this fiscal year's solicitation, either as a lead applicant or as a partner. However, new applications and continuation applicants are eligible. Lastly, I wanted to just note that partnerships are required, and within this, and this is one of the questions, so I want to answer that. And within this eligibility solicitation is they must be a victim service provider, or you must partner with a victim service provider. So now we're going to go into partnerships, and this was a lot of the questions we had as well. At least one partnership is required, and we have 3 different types of partnerships to review. The first type of partnership, is an applicant must partner with any type of organization if the applicant has at least 3 years of demonstrated experience and expertise in providing direct services to victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking from the targeted underserved community. The second type of partnership is if your organization has less than 3 years of demonstrated experience and expertise in providing population-specific services, you must include and work in partnership with a victim service provider. And then the last category is for our disability program applicants. For these applications, that are former disability grantees, the partnership must be comprised of, at a minimum, the following: at least one victim service provider and at least one nonprofit, non-governmental organization or tribal organization serving individuals with disabilities and or deaf individuals. All applications should include the organizations necessary to meet the goals of the proposed project and those needed to implement the proposed activities. Once again, one partner is a minimum requirement. More than one partner is allowed, and partners must be organizations, not individuals. I strongly encourage that you review the definitions of the eligible applicant types and partnership requirements in your solicitation carefully. As I stated previously, this can be found on pages 10 and 11 of the solicitation. Because you must demonstrate which category you are in, and you simply cannot state, I'm one of these categories. The application must show that you either have the minimum 3 years experience providing direct victim services for the crimes of domestic violence and sexual violence, or the application must demonstrate how the partner organization meets the OVW definition of victim service provider. Again, the application must clearly demonstrate how all eligibility requirements are met. This includes how the applicant is an eligible applicant and how partnerships have been met. So I know that was a lot of information and we had a lot of questions regarding eligibility and partnerships in the prior section. So I want to give us time to go through this and ask if anyone has any questions.
This is Kara. I just want to jump in because there's lots of confusion and questions about where to find the definition of culturally specific. If somebody puts it in the question box, the question goes away. So I want to comment that I put a link to where you can find that in the chat box. So when you get to that question, please keep referring back to the chat box. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. Okay. Daisy, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. So I will start with one of the ones we had before. Like you probably have answered it, but what if we do not serve the deaf population? Will we lose points?
No, it's not whether or not you serve the deaf population. Remember, there's 5 different eligibility categories. So if you're a nonprofit, non-governmental organization, and one of the 5 categories, that is the minimum requirement for this grant. So if you are not a deaf program, but you're an LGBT organization, then you would be eligible for this program, and your application would address the LGBT and so forth.
Okay. So the next question is, does underserved population include refugees and forcibly displaced communities?
The eligibility clearly states that to be eligible, once again, I'm going to go back, you have to meet the nonprofit, non-governmental organization, and one of the 5 categories. And the organizations, the project under the funding must address domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, or stalking.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, can organizations whose primary purpose provides direct services to underserved population, but is currently physically sponsored by another nonprofit 501c3 organization?
This is a very nuanced question that takes a lot of other back and forth. So unfortunately, I don't feel like this is the venue that we can actually answer that, because that would be a situation where one of us as team members would need to be able to go to discuss with the person asking the question. I would like to reiterate that you have to have a 501c3 in order to be awarded funds. If you do not have your 501c3 at the time of application, that is okay, but you will, if you are awarded funds, you must be a 501c3 by then.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is an LOI required?
A letter of intent is not required.
So this is probably some of what Kara is referring to for the next couple of questions. What is the eligibility for the culturally specific population grant that has not been posted?
Yes, I would refer you to the link in the chat box. Please check out that definition.
So the next question, can you elaborate on the difference between this program and the CSSP program as to how to know if you are a program that will be ineligible for CSSP and eligible for this program?
I feel like we've already asked and answered this question, but I will go over it again because it is important for folks to know which grant they should apply. What I would encourage anybody who is questioning on this category, go review first the CSSP definition, their eligibility criteria. Go there first. And if you meet that eligibility, by all means, when that application comes out, apply for it. They got a lot of money. The second thing, so if you don't meet that eligibility, then you want to come over to the underserved application and then review the 5 categories within our eligibility. And that's how you would determine whether or not you're eligible for a CSSP, which is the culturally specific program, or the underserved program.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, I currently work for a nonprofit mental health agency in Galveston, Texas. We provide services to victims of crimes through the VOCA program. Would we be eligible to apply for this grant funding opportunity?
You would need to determine your eligibility based off of the factors that we just mentioned, that you're a nonprofit, and you're one of the 5 categories, and that you're going to be providing services for victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, or stalking.
Okay, so this next question is similar to what you answered, but you may dive a little deeper, so I'll read it to you. Organizations serving certain underserved racial and ethnic populations. If an organization's primary purpose is to serve low-income community members, and the majority of clients in fact belong to underserved racial and ethnic populations, but services are not exclusively reserved for such population, is the organization eligible?
So the organization needs to meet, and I'm going to I want to emphasize on the definition, and you will see this of the eligibility within the solicitation. The organization must, I'm going to find it again, so I make sure I say exactly how it is. The category of that organization as a whole, its primary purpose is to serve one of the 5 eligibility categories, either deaf, LGBT, underserved religious populations, disability programs, or organizations where the primary purpose is to serve underserved racial and ethnic populations that are not eligible for the CSSP grant.
Okay.
So if you're a mental health organization, and you meet one of those 5 criteria, and then you have but in your nonprofit and you meet the eligibility, or you believe you meet the eligibility for underserved racial, underserved, excuse me, racial and ethnic populations, then you would apply, but you have to remember this is about providing services for victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, and dating violence. I hope that clarifies that a little bit more.
Okay, thank you. So this is a similar, but how do you demonstrate that your organization qualifies as one of the 5 applicant types?
You have to, applicants need to clearly explain how they meet that definition. That's, so when we mean by demonstrate is tell us how you meet that. When we go into the program narrative here in the next section, you'll understand a little bit more what we mean by that. But we're really talking about explaining to us how you meet that definition and illustrating in words on that.
Okay. So I'm going to try and combine the next 2 questions together. They're very similar.
Okay.
Can you please link the previous RFP for the culturally specific program? If our organization would be eligible under this grant, confirming that renders us ineligible here. And then the other one is for organizations that serve underserved racial and ethnic populations. Does the mission statement have to reflect this as a priority?
That's a good question. The mission statement, Kara, I would say no. It's about what the organization as a whole is serving that population.
This is Kara speaking. We will double check an organization's mission to verify that they indeed can demonstrate. Like we look at the number 1 place to look, like Betty has just said, is you must demonstrate in your answers to the application that you meet the definition, but we will also double check the mission statement to verify that's one of your primary purposes. Because again, the definitions of the 5 category all say, as Betty keeps saying, you must be as one of your primary purposes or all of your primary purpose to serve one of these 5 populations.
And then regarding the link for the previous solicitations, we'll definitely have one of our team members just post the link where you can find solicitations.
Okay, thank you. So our next question is, we are a victim service agency with a deaf service program. Will it work to partner with another social service agency serving deaf people?
So hopefully maybe this will clarify. If your program is a deaf victim services program, so your victim services and you provide services to deaf survivors, then you would want to partner with, you would need to go back to and determine whether or not you need partner 1 or partner 2 within the solicitation.
Thank you. Our next question is a partnership required if your agency already provide direct service, victim services as a solo nonprofit organization?
I'm sorry, can you read that again, Daisy?
Yes, I'm sorry, I may not be close. Is a partnership required if your agency already provide direct victim services as a solo nonprofit organization?
Yes, a partnership is required. You would need to determine if you meet partnership number 1 or partnership number 2, but partnerships are required.
So the next question is, as a deaf organization, we understand that the involvement of previous partners from the Disability Grant Program Award is required for our project. Could you please provide guidance on where we can find information about these previous partners?
Carol?
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt Betty, but I could see what this question's getting at. So you can be eligible as a deaf program to apply for underserved if you meet the definition of deaf program as outlined in our solicitation. Or you can be a prior disability grantee that serves the deaf community and eligible in that category. If you're coming in as a disability grantee, now eligible disability grant program serving the deaf community, your collaboration should just be the same as it was last year because you're just coming out of that program. If you're a deaf program, not associated with the disability program, this question is confusing the two different definitions. So again, if you're a deaf program coming in just straightforward, you do not have to have anything to do with the disability program. If you're coming from the disability program, that's considered that category. If you want to ask Betty about that more specifically, your nuanced question, please email her at the OVW Underserved email box, and she can explain that in more depth.
Thank you, Kara.
Thank you, Kara. Okay, so the next question is limited English proficiency consider a disability for the purpose of this opportunity?
The disability section, once again, I want to make sure that we're clear. It goes to what Kara was just talking about. The disability criteria is for that fifth category, excuse me, for the fourth category is, I'm going to go back to it. It is for organizations who are coming from the disability grant program, who are no longer eligible for that funding. They're now eligible to come into the underserved, but they have to meet with their same partners from the disability grant program in the underserved grant program. So it's either deaf or the disability grant, former grant program recipients.
Okay. So the next question is, can a program under the umbrella of a 501c3 partner with another program under the same nonprofit if they provide different services?
I think I'm going to kick that to the when we get to Alanda's part.
Okay. The next question is, can a government organization be a partner?
No, it has to be partners or applicants. It must be a nonprofit, non-governmental organization.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, if our program is located within a safety net hospital and has more than 3 years experience, are we still eligible for funding if our hospital is under the umbrella of a municipal corporation?
The organization that's applying must be a nonprofit.
Okay, so this is a long one. Let me see if I can.
And let me just hold on real quick, Daisy. For that person who asked that question, that is a question we can also ask, talk with Alanda about when we get to the budget side of things, the GMFD side, okay?
Okay. So this one is, we are just confused as to whether we will be eligible to apply for this grant, because right now our primary goal as a 501c3 is to serve primarily and secondarily victims of sexual assault, regardless of their underserved status. However, we want to start creating programs focusing on the trans population because that population is already underserved in Mississippi. We see this need and want to be able to provide these services. I see that on page 6, number 3, reflects, quote unquote, that strengthen the capacity of a traditional victim service provider to provide population services, end quote. Will our situation apply to be eligible to apply for this grant?
Great question. So I'm not going to answer the question to the specifics, but I want to just, in a more general term, is that if you provide victim services for more than 3 years, then you would want to partner with an underserved population that meets one of the 5 categories. So that's where you're going to want to go into the eligibility and the partnerships to determine how you're going to apply and what your project's going to be. So for example, I will actually put it this way. It's probably easier to put it this way. You would want the LGBT organization to apply And then you as the victim service provider would be their partner. That's probably a better way of explaining that.
Okay, and this is similar, and this may involve the question to the right, but I want to read it to you. Both opportunities appear to say that the primary purpose of the organization must be to provide services to a specific population. Our organization purpose, our mission is broader than that, but we serve almost exclusively 98% women of color. We provide services to victim survivors of DV and SA. Are we truly not eligible to apply for either of these if our purpose is not stated specifically to serve those populations?
So I think that's, I really want you to go back to the eligibility of that. And then the second piece I think is really important is how the applicant demonstrates they meet that eligibility. So that's a very important piece of this. So you have your eligibility, you have your partnership, and then you have to explain to us and illustrate how you meet that eligibility. So that's going to be one of the biggest factors. And this goes back to what Kara was saying in the last segment around when we were talking about the eligibility and demonstration of within the application. Kara, would you mind coming back on and reiterating what you were saying on that previously?
This is Kara speaking. Betty, can you one more time directly ask me the question that's being discussed?
Yes, this organization is they primarily 98% serve a specific, if this organization serves women of color, I believe is what they said. But it's not in their like mission organizational structure that like.
Got you. Yeah.
And so I was, what I was explaining was that, they have to determine their eligibility. And then if they can demonstrate in the application are the eligibility and how they meet that specific eligibility. Right. So, but you also gave another example previously, and I wanted you to jump in on that.
I'm not remembering the previous example already, so I apologize, but I just want to reiterate based on that question, a few things. Is one, I'm going to repeat the thing that Betty keeps saying over and over so that we're very clear, is that as you're answering your application, as you're putting together the 20 pages that you're going to be required for the narrative that Betty will talk about next, the questions that we have listed there will provide you an opportunity to demonstrate that you meet one of these 5 category and definitions. And when you talk about women of color, I want to remind you that the 5th category talks about one of your primary purposes, serving a racial ethnic minority that would not be eligible in the OVW culturally specifically service program. So I would encourage this applicant to look at that program first to see if you're eligible there. And then again, if your primary purpose or 98% of the people you're serving there, like that information, for example, could be used to demonstrate that's your purpose. But you would like the questions we're going to ask you later on that Betty will go over will say, like, what services are you providing? Who are you serving? Like, these are answers you can provide that would demonstrate it. But again, I would look very carefully at the culturally specific definition to see what racial ethnic minorities are eligible there, to see if you're not eligible there, then you could apply an underserved. And Betty, I know we keep repeating it, but I know we get lots of questions about that, but there's no other answer but that. Is to number one, look at that definition in their program, and then very specifically, again, repeatedly look at the underserved page on eligibility where the definitions that Betty has read out loud are listed. We cannot tell you based on your question, yes or no, you're eligible. It's just not going to work that way. But you can keep probing her if you need to.
Thank you, Kara, for pointing that out. Yes, we cannot specifically say whether or not you're eligible, but you are more than welcome to keep probing and asking us questions.
Okay. I am confused by the required partnership on page 12 of the solicitation. It say all applicants must have at least one formal project partner as described. As a direct service provider, we meet all other requirements. So I'm confused about why we require a project partner.
Why you're required to have a project partner?
Yes.
Under the partnership, is that what the question is?
Yes.
The victim services partnership, I'm going to go back to it because I want to be very specific to understand what this person was trying to say, okay? So I want to make sure I'm clear in explaining. So the first partnership type is the applicant must partner with any type of the 5 organizations if listed in the eligibility category. If the applicant has at least 3 years of victim demonstrated experience in providing direct services. So, and then the second partnership is if your organization has less than 3 years of demonstrative experience in providing population specific, you need to meet with a victim services provider. So if you are a, let's say a deaf program who provides victim services and you've been providing it over 3 years, we still want you to have a partnership with, let's say, a traditional, mainstream hearing traditional victim services, because this is about building a community. And that's why we're having partnerships. It's because we really are wanting to make sure that we are reducing barriers to access and services for underserved population. And so the partnership piece of that is to making sure that we're doing that correctly in our communities and then creating better communities within our partnerships. I hope that answers that question.
Okay, thank you. So these next 2 questions are very similar, so I will ask them together.
Okay.
If approved to receive funds from this grant, but we are eligible for the culturally specific grant, serving one of the specific culture listed in the RPF, will we be able to apply for that grant when it comes out?
If you're eligible for the culturally specific services program grant, then yes, if you feel you're eligible, you can definitely apply to that program. But if you apply to that, you would not be eligible. If you qualify for CSSP, then you're not eligible for this underserved grant.
Thank you. So the next statement is, and this is from a previous question, let me reiterate, our organization is founded to address disparities based on race and gender. All of our services are designated to serve women of color, primarily Hispanic and Black.
Mm-hmm.
This is a follow-up to the question you answered a couple questions ago, I think based on eligibility.
Okay. I feel like this has been asked and answered. You would want to go back and see if you meet the culturally specific program services first. And then if you don't meet that criteria, then you want to come back to this grant and determine whether or not you would meet the eligibility under one of the 5 categories that we listed. And then just demonstrate in your application how you meet that.
Okay, this next question is pretty similar to what you just answered. Previously, we were not eligible for culturally specific programs. As we are not ECBO, does that mean we qualify for this grant?
So if you are not eligible for the culturally specific services program grant, then you would go back to the eligibility question, to the eligibility on here of those 5 categories and your nonprofit. Once again, we cannot say yes or no specifically regarding your organization.
Okay, so the next question is, it sounded like you said if the mission statement does not reflect that you fall within one of the 5 categories, you will not be considered eligible for funding. Can you verify or say more on that point?
I don't believe we said that if your mission statement does not reflect that. What we said is that if you feel you meet the eligibility criteria under the solicitation, that we would ask you to demonstrate how you meet that eligibility.
Okay. So the next question is, we currently have an OVW LAV grant that does not fully fund our work to serve immigrant survivors of DV, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. Would we be able to apply for this grant to supplement our unfunded work if the work meets the eligibility requirements under both?
If you do not meet the culturally specific services program eligibility, then you can come and see and determine if you meet our eligibility. And you can, if you are expanding your project or creating a new project. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there.
So we'll take one more and then we'll take Brandon. So the next question is, under partnership type 1, it says any type of organization. This is kind of vague. Is there more information? Would there be another nonprofit, a government agency?
Once again, it's got to be nonprofit. And what we mean by organization is one of the 5 categories organizations that are within the eligibility.
So right now we'll take Brandon. If you will unmute Brandon for his question.
Hi, thank you so much for your time. I had asked my question anonymously because I felt like maybe there were other organizations that could fit in that category. So Betty, back to your clarification about the culturally specific. I'm sorry to ask so many questions about it. Our organization specifically, Utopia Washington, we're able to justify and clarify that we are both an LGBTQ organization, but we also provide services culturally specific to Pacific Islanders, specifically queer and trans Pacific Islanders. So I just wanted to clarify your answer. Because we're able to prove that we are an LGBTQ org for this grant, if we were to receive funding for this grant, will we be then eligible to also apply for culturally specific because we're able to also justify that grant?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So we can, okay, thank you. That helps.
Yeah. Because if you, as long as you, Brandon, are coming in under this grant as the LGBT program, and then as a Pacific Islander, right? Is that what you said? I believe.
Yeah.
You could then go to CSSP, for their eligibility under. I think that falls under the Asian category. Asian.
It's Native Americans, Native Hawaiians. Pacific
Yeah.
Islanders.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That helps so much. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So if we are a legal service provider organization applying, can we partner with a government organization, a police department, for example?
If you are a nonprofit, non-governmental agency, and you meet one of the 5 eligibility category, the question is, can you meet with a government? Can your partner be a government? And
yes,
no, it's everyone's got to be a nonprofit.
Okay. So, is there a limit on the amount of budgeted to legal services? I will leave that one. Sorry. Okay.
And just real quick, I want to let you all know that Brandon literally just put in the chat the culturally specific services grant eligibility criteria. So you all know from the 2023 RFP is what he said.
Okay. So I have 2 more, Betty.
Okay.
Okay. So we have a project within our organization where we meet with the immigrant survivors, the DV, SA, and stalking, educating them about their rights, providing them with needed information. So it's very much a face-to-face cooperation between the organization and the survivors. Does this sound like a fit for Purpose Area 5, working in cooperation with an underserved population to develop and implement outreach, education, prevention, etc.?
I want to be clear, the organization who's underserved is the one who needs to apply. So if your legal services agency and your organization meets one of the 5 criteria, then you can apply under this grant. But if you are not an underserved organization, providing legal services, then you would want to get together with someone in your community and having them as a lead applicant and for these services. You would want to talk about that within your community.
Okay, thank you. So, hi, I don't think this question was answered. Can a program under the umbrella of a 501c3 partner with another program under the same nonprofit if they provide different services?
I think this is the question that would really need to go to our grants management financial division. You can either ask that of Yolanda when she gets back in, but she also put in the chat the email where you can ask the nonprofit, financial questions directly to the grants management financial division in order to better serve you on your determination within this application.
Okay. So our next question is, if you're eligible for both CSSP and underserved, can we apply to both?
I'm going to go back and say, if you're eligible for CSSP, then it's kind of like what Brandon's question was. So are you coming in one of the other categories, or are you coming in under the same? Because it's like underserved, racial and ethnic. No, you cannot if you qualify under CSSP. But if you're coming in here in one of the other categories, then yes, you're eligible to apply. All right. So
Okay, so I have two more and then we can move on.
Okay.
I have one written and one live, and then we'll move on.
okay,
So
perfect.
the written question is, we are not a population-specific organization, but we do offer services to underserved communities and DV survivors from diverse backgrounds and contexts. Is this grant applicable to us, or is it applicable?
Once again, I've got to reiterate that the eligibility of the categories is that you are an organization whose purpose is to serve one of these underserved populations.
Okay, and so we will have Chris live question, and then we will move on.
Thank you. Chris.
Thank you so much. So I'm going back to the partnership thing because I'm really vexed by this. We fit perfectly under option number 5, organizations serving certain underserved racial and ethnic populations. So we fit that. So what I'm understanding is, would we need to then partner with one of the other 4 types of organizations, the deaf programs, LGBTQ, the underserved religious populations, or disability?
You would want to identify with any of the other organizations. So it doesn't have to be one of the other 4.
Okay. So just trying to understand, we would need to partner with another
Organization within the 5 categories.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That clarifies it.
I'm
Thank
sorry,
you.
Betty. To me, you just said that they had to partner with another underserved of one of the 4 categories. I don't think that's what you meant.
Okay. What
He was
did you,
asking if he comes in as category 5, does he have to partner with a deaf, LGBT, or religious minority? And the answer is no. If he
Cool.
comes in on category 4 at 5, he would partner with, based on his experience, either another organization of any type, or he has to partner with a victim service provider.
correct?
Okay.
Yes.
And when you say any type of organization, again, I'm just trying to clarify, what exactly does any type of organization, clearly a nonprofit, but does it have to necessarily be a DV organization? Could it be legal services organization or something like that?
Kara, do you want to jump in? Because I think it may be best if they hear
I
different
think
terms.
it's hard because also Betty can't see the questions, so we're trying to read them to her, so the nuances are sometimes getting lost. So one, I want to clarify, you don't have to partner with a nonprofit. You have to be a nonprofit to apply. So I just want to verify that one. I think that was a little bit of confusion that got said. And number 2, you have to be a nonprofit who meets one of those 5 categories. As I heard you, that you believe that you are racial ethnic minority who's not eligible for class. So that would be something you're interested in applying as. You would have to determine and demonstrate whether you have at least 3 years experience providing direct services, domestic and sexual violence. If you have that experience and you can demonstrate that to us, you can choose to partner with a victim service program, with a social service organization, with another culturally specific organization. Like, you can decide that on your own. But if you do not have that 3 years experience providing direct services for domestic and sexual violence, then you're required to partner with a victim service provider, and that organization must meet the definition of victim service provider as specified in our solicitation.
Okay.
Was that clear?
That is much clearer now. I really appreciate that, because we are number 5 and we've been around a long time, a lot longer than 3 years, providing these specific services. So I just want to clarify. So just one more. So we could partner with somebody with certain areas that might actually enhance our proposal. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. I got you now. Finally. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm a little
it's
thick
okay.
today, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And I appreciate that, because sometimes we all need to hear it just from a different lens. And so if it helps other people, that's good. All right. Daisy, can I go on now?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Now we're going to get into what I call, this is the substance of the solicitation of the application, is the program narrative. There are 3 sections to be completed within the application. The purpose of proposal, the purpose of proposal for the month, how I look at it is like, it's the who, what, why, when, and how of the project that you're proposing to complete with the underserved award funds. So when we're looking at the narrative, we really want to know, what are you going to be doing? Who are you going to be working with? What will you be doing? And how are you going to do it all? And then within that project, remember, this is the lens is, how are you going to address the barriers underserved specific populations face? Because what we're trying to do is ensure that these projects are survivors from underserved specific populations are centered, leading, or involved in the project to ensure that we can reduce barriers to accessing and receiving victim services. So I just want to reiterate that. The next thing is there's going to be different questions in this solicitation that was in previous solicitations. And here I'm going to highlight a few of those questions. One of the questions actually is going to ask you, how will your project address the barriers survivors from underserved specific populations face? Here's another question. What is your organization proposing? It has several parts. What are you guys going to do? How are you going to take those purpose areas and address the barriers that survivors of underserved populations are facing? Here's another example within the project narrative questions. We want you to identify what barrier you're going to be addressing to help underserved population survivors. We also want you in your program narrative to describe the solutions and the strategies your project's going to implement to address these barriers that you just identified in your project narrative. And who or what are the critical elements to the stated solutions and strategies for survivors from underserved populations to access and receive services. It may feel like we're being really redundant here, but we want to make sure that everyone understands that this grant is about how your project is going to address the barriers and reduce the barriers that underserved population survivors are facing. All right. So the other thing I want to mention within this grant, and you'll see this in the solicitation and some of the questions, is about the intersectionality of serving underserved populations. As we all know, underserved populations are not monolithic communities. So therefore, in the what will be done section, we're going to ask you to tell us how the project is going to be accessible to deaf and hard of hearing survivors. How is your project going to help survivors with disabilities or who have limited English proficiency? Additionally, we're going to want applicants to describe in detail how the project will be accessible. Once again, the project narrative is your opportunity to describe to us what your project's going to do, why you want to do it, what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, to address and remove the barriers that underserved populations are facing from accessing and receiving services. Pardon me, Daisy? Do we have any questions on this?
We have a couple questions. So,
okay.
The first question is, would a needs assessment to help address the specific service needs of a population and help address the barriers, would a need assessment be an allowable piece of this proposal, basically? Is this an allowable cost?
Oh, is a needs assessment allowable cost?
Yes.
I feel like I'm going to get this wrong. So Daisy or Kara, do you know? Because I know research is unallowable.
No.
I apologize. I was in the chat box. I was telling somebody to put a Q&A question to you.
Research is unallowable, but is a needs assessment allowed under this funding?
So research is unallowed.
Yeah.
What you can do is client satisfaction surveys to improve your programming, but the research aspect of, I wouldn't put it in your application. And if you get funded, I would talk to you. I'd talk to your grant manager after, to be honest. It would, if it even looks like research, it will look like you're putting in unallowable activities. But once you are funded, you can talk to your grant manager and talk about what you're trying to get at. That's
Yeah.
the honest answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
And
I
then-
wouldn't even suggest putting
Yeah.
it in there because it's going to look like research and it could flag you out because it's a really big deal and a big government wide thing. The only thing that we are definitely outright allow is you're allowed to do, you know, client satisfaction, like quick questions about people who are coming to you. But if you want to delve deeper into something, what you're talking about, it would be something that you could talk to your OVW grant manager once you're funded. It's the easiest way to deal with this.
Yeah, and I would also just add the Department of Justice financial guide is another area where you can go in and get the specifics on the unallowable costs, but those unallowable costs are also within the solicitation itself. All right, thank you, Daisy. Next question. Thank you, Kara. I'm sorry. Daisy?
Yes. So I'm going to combine these. Basically is, will the recording, slide deck all be available, and how do we access it? Will it be emailed to us?
This recording, this pre-app session, is that what you said, Daisy?
Yes. Slide deck recording, and how will we access it?
So this pre-application session is being recorded and it will be uploaded onto the OVW website in a couple of days. And it will also have a transcript.
So I do not see any more questions for this area.
Okay, well, wonderful. So now is going to be the time where we're going to focus on the application of your application that relates to the documents that on our financial team, the Grants Financial Management Division reviews. And today we have Alonda Thomas here from GFMDV to review, here to talk with you about the budget section of the application. So Alonda, I'm gonna come off and you come on.
Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Alonda Thomas, and I will be discussing some items that GFMD has identified from prior year's applications that could help with expediting our review process. Before I begin, I wanted to share contact information with you. If you have any questions about the GFMD information discussed during today's presentation, please feel free to contact the GFMD help desk at ovw.gfmd@usdoj.gov. We have a group of knowledgeable financial analysts ready to answer your questions and concerns. I'll also put the email address in the comment box. Can you turn to the next slide? Thank you. So for today, we're going to highlight certain aspects of the pre-award risk assessment and provide you with a link to a detailed webinar on how to develop the budget that will be included in your application. First, we'll highlight the items identified in the summary data sheet, which is completed by all applicants. Specifically, 3 items that we would like to discuss are the nonprofit requirements, the single audit response, and the IRS, 3-step safe harbor procedure. If you are an eligible victim, service provider to receive Underserved program, you are required to submit a determination letter from the IRS recognizing your tax exempt status. OVW cannot make an award to any nonprofit organization that does not submit a 501c3 determination letter. We highlight this specifically because applicants are not including this as part of their application, and this further delays our review. Please ensure that this document is included if applicable. OVW requests that all applicants provide a statement as to whether they have expended $750,000 or more in federal funding during their last fiscal year. If they have, then they indicate that and also specify the end date of their last fiscal year. However, GFMD is finding that applicants do not always include all of this information. Please ensure that this question is answered in its entirety on the summary data sheet, specifically question number 3. Another item that we'd like to highlight from the solicitation is specifically for nonprofit organizations. If you use the IRS 3-step safe harbor procedure to determine your executive's compensation, you are required to provide a disclosure letter. Please refer to the solicitation for further details and a link to a sample letter. Note that there are 4 required parts of this disclosure letter. The sample letter provided outlines all 4 parts of the disclosure, so please ensure that you follow the sample, and provide a response to each of the 4 pieces. The next item that we'd like to discuss is the pre-award risk assessment questions, which assist GFMD during their pre-award risk assessment review for all applications. Each applicant must prepare a response to all 11 questions, and each question has multiple parts. We've noticed from prior years that applicants do not always fully answer all parts of the question, which in turn requires GFMD to reach out to the applicant and which may delay funding decisions. Some of the most common issues that we've encountered have been, for example, question number 2, where the applicant indicates that they do indeed have internal policies, but they don't provide a brief list of topics covered in the policies and procedures. On question 3, some applicants fail to provide a brief summary of the organization's process for tracking expenditures, and more specifically, whether or not it tracks budgeted versus actual expenditures. These are just a few examples, but in general, please make sure that you read each piece of each of the questions and provide a full and comprehensive response. This next slide will quickly highlight some resources that are available as you're creating the budget to be submitted with your application. Over the last couple of years, GFMD has developed a detailed webinar presentation on how to develop a budget to be submitted with OVW applications. This presentation addresses some of the challenges that you may face with your budgets and provides some insight on OVW's budget review process. This webinar can be found at the link on this slide. Next up is the uniform guidance, which can be found at 2 CFR 200. Use your favorite search engine for this one. Other resources include the DOJ financial guide and the solicitation itself. So we know this can be a lot to process and a lot of information to be had. So if you have any questions about the GFMD information discussed, please feel free to contact the GFMD Help Desk at 1-888-514-8556 or by email at ovw.gfmd@usdoj. We have a group of knowledgeable financial analysts ready to answer your questions and concerns. I'll also put this information in the comment box. We have someone monitoring the help desk right now, so if you have any questions, you can send it directly to us and you should receive a response either today or no later than early morning. I hope this answered all of your questions. Back to you.
Thank you, Linda. Would you be able to stay for a couple of minutes and we can move some questions right here for you that some of the folks may have?
What I will say is I'm not entirely sure that I'll be able to answer all of the questions because some questions that may come through, sometimes we have to do research and it just depends on how complex the question is. So I mean, you can ask a couple of them because I do have another meeting coming up at 4, but yeah, it depends on how complex the questions are.
All right, so why don't we do this? We'll throw the questions to you, and then you let us know if it's too nuanced, and we'll have folks email you. How's that sound?
That sounds good.
All
Thank you.
right. Thank you. Okay, Daisy, do we have any easy questions for Alanda?
So there's 4 questions, and so I'll ask these and see what happens. So the first one is there a requirement that the partner identified in this application come to the technical training, TTA training? If so, is the amount for the TTA training to be split evenly between the applicant and the partner on the budget?
So it all depends. It doesn't have to be split evenly. It just has to be used appropriately depending on the program, and that would actually be better discussed with the program manager, with the program office. When we see, sometimes some of the budgets that I see some more of the funding in the direct recipients travel as opposed to the sub-recipients. So it's not a rule that it has to be split equally, but I would definitely look at the big picture of how many people did you want to bring from your organization, and how many people did you want to include from the sub-recipient. You should definitely include your partners, but it does not have to be split equally.
Thank you. So the second question is piggybacking off of that question earlier. Is the TTA training an annual training? How many days is the training? If the partner are not required to come and there's money left over from the 5,000 budgeted for the TTA training, can those funds be reallocated elsewhere on the budget after completion of the training?
That's more of a programmatic question. Generally, you would go to the program manager to discuss that. Sometimes you would have to, well, most of the times you would have to discuss it prior with them and then submit a programmatic GAM to request, can you move funds from travel? Since it's in a solicitation, that is a requirement. Some program managers allow you to do that after it's been some time in the grant and you've kind of met all of the requirements. They may decide that the money would be better spent in another category, but that's definitely, it can be done, but however, you would discuss that with your program manager.
Okay, thank you.
Well, is it an annual training, and how long is the training?
Again, that's another program, programmatic.
I'll jump in here on that one real quick, Alanda. So technical assistant TA trainings are required. And there is the new grantee orientation that you must go to. And then there's also the Summer Institute that you must attend as well.
What determines if you need to complete the IRS 3-step process?
Okay, that question I would like to be emailed to the help desk so I can get all of, there's just a lot of information that I have to pull up and consolidate.
Okay, thank you. Back to the question on legal services, there is no limit amount for whoever asked that question. And then there's one more question. I understand we need an MOU with a partner, but the question is, with an MOU partner, do we need to have a sub-award agreement? And do we need to provide a sub-award policies as mentioned in the NOFO?
That would be a programmatic question.
Okay. So do we need to have a sub-award agreement? That will be part of the sub-award that you have with your MOU partner will be part of your budget. I'm not sure how much it will be in agreement other than you discuss it with your MOU partner.
Can I just jump in right here? For the purpose
Yeah.
of your application, you need to submit the narrative, the budget, and the memorandum of understanding, which is a project document that you're submitting as part of your application. If you are funded, these questions can come later in terms of how you will work with your partner. So for the purpose of just right now, focus on your application If you are then funded, you can work with the financial and program division to determine the method of how you will contract that if you have questions at that point. But you don't have to answer that right now.
Okay, thank you, Kara. And that is all of our questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Daisy. Thank you so much, Alonda, for coming in and chatting with folks here at the pre-application session.
Thank you for having me.
All right, remember, the email to our help desk is in the chat, and they're great, and they will respond, I promise. As someone who's learning, they help me out. Thank you. All right. So we just have a couple more slides to go through. These are just a couple of important things to know. This again is in your solicitation, but I just want to highlight them briefly. So I'm going to go through this list right now. All applicants must have a DUNS number. You can find information on how to access a DUNS number, create a DUNS number within the solicitation. But I just want to point this out. I also want to point out that all applicants must register online with SAM and grants.gov. So that both of them have to be registered. Another thing I want you to know is that if you ever have technical difficulties while you are, doing the application, submitting the application, please keep documentation of your correspondence, because if it comes to the point where you're having technical difficulties and you're at the deadline, that correspondence is going to help us at OVW be able to make a determination of whether or not we can accept your application. So because of that. So I really want you to know, keep that correspondence, maintain that correspondence, and we'll work with y'all. And then lastly, I want you to know, your DUNS, your SAMs, your grants.gov, please make sure that that you complete that as soon as possible. And that's because it can take several weeks. And so we don't want you to delay on that and then not be able to apply for the funding or receive an award if granted. So those are some really important things to know. There's also, I want to point out that there is a two-step process for the application. And once again, this is in your solicitation. You're going to submit the S4424 and the SFLLL. Don't ask me what that stands for. It's in the solicitation. In grants.gov. You please submit this no later than 48 hours before the deadline. Super important for you. And then you're going to also know that submitting your application and your attachments in the Just Grant system. And then lastly, but certainly not the least important, because it's the most important thing, I feel like, is the deadlines. March 5th is your deadline to register your SAM. And then March 26th is your grants.gov submission. And March 28th is your deadline for the Just Grant system submission. So those are some important dates you want to put on your calendar for as it relates to applying for the Underserved Grant Program. So if you run into any problems, if you have any questions, here's our technical support phone number and their email. And then also here's the Just Grants support and email if you have problems with the Just Grant system when you're applying. And then last but not least, if you run into, you need to have any other questions, please email the Underserved team at underserved@usdoj.gov. You can also find additional resources on our website at justice.gov/OVW/resources-applicants. So I just want to say thank you all so much for coming and attending today's pre-application session. I want to reiterate that we are here to answer as questions that we can. Please email us, and this recording of the session will be uploaded and placed on our website, I believe, in a couple of days. So With that, are there any last minute questions?
Yes, there are 2 last-minute questions. So
Okay.
our SAM, our SAM is up for renewal in May. Does a renewal take several weeks?
Yes, I would go ahead and get on that SAMs right away.
Okay. So the next question is to confirm. So the only 2 forms required, there are only 2 forms required for grants.gov.
So grants.gov is going to be, yeah, your application and any attachments. It's going to also be the same for within Just Grants.
Okay. So the last question to confirm, this grant is to add or expand services and does not support continuing existing services.
And Karen?
I feel like I just want to make sure, because I don't want anyone to turn away hearing like wrong information. And it's sometimes when the way questions are being asked, it gets a little confusing for us. You are allowed to, if you are already providing services, you can use this grant to continue providing those services. I want to make sure if the person's asking and I'm not answering correctly, because I feel like Betty answered this, and I want to make sure we're not limiting people by them not hearing correctly. So if you want to ask it differently, like by putting your, like going on camera and asking, as I hear you, you're saying, is it okay to use this grant to continue services we're already providing? Yes, you can continue service you're already providing. You don't have to add more stuff if you don't want to. It just gets more in the nuance about supplanting, and that's a whole other thing about budget stuff. But if you're saying that I provide domestic violence services, I'd like to use this grant to provide more direct domestic violence services, or just continue what I'm doing, yes, that is allowed. I hope that was clear. I'm sorry, Betty, thank you.
So now we have 2 other questions. So UEI has replaced DUNS. That's a yes or no.
Yes.
Okay. Back to my LAV question. If our unfunded work is $1 million and LAV only funded 600,000, does the 400,000 count as an expansion of the project?
I want to make sure I'm understanding this question. So want to go back to what Kara just said. So if the person is comfortable, can pop up so we can, I can understand it correctly. Because what I think I'm hearing is you're currently providing victim services. LAV pays for a portion of it. And you're wanting to know if the underserved, if you apply, underserved can cover the other $400,000 of that project that's already happening.
Yes, this is Beth Ann Hellard. I'm with the Tahari Justice Center. So yes, that is my question, is that we are an immigrant services provider. And so that's really my question is when you define the project, is funding unfunded work an expansion of the project?
Well, that's a great question. And that goes exactly to what Kara just said, is that if you're already providing the services, you can apply for funding to pay for those services. You do not have to expand or create a new project.
So I'm sorry, say that again.
So you do not have to create a new project. If you're currently already doing these services, you can apply for that project to pay for those services.
Right.
I'm sorry, this is a really nuanced question about like legal stuff too. What I'm trying to make sure that I'm understanding is you're not supplanting, because that will get you in trouble. If you have a domestic violence advocate funded by VOCA, you can't take
none of our staff are fully funded.
Right. So if you have, let's say, okay, so 2 examples. Do you have a half-time advocate? That's all you have money for. You want to use our grant to pay the other half of the advocate to do services that are in scope of this program? You can do it that way. You have a full-time domestic violence advocate. You want to add a second advocate to do the exact same thing with her or with them, sorry. You can do that as well. But yeah, you can continuing doing the programming you already have. You just want to look at, there's information about what supplanting is, and that's about how you're funding your staff.
None of our staff are, I think we have 1 staff member that's fully funded under a grant, under a LAV grant, but most of our staff are funded. We cobble together funding from, 8 different grants to to get us close, but
Yes, yes, yes.
most of our staff are not fully funded by government grants.
As long
So-
as you are very specific that what you want to use this grant for is in the scope of what Betty has just outlined. It has to be domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking, and the activities must fall within those 6 areas of purpose areas.
Yes, we meet those
Yes.
criteria.
And if you
Okay.
want specific nuanced questions like this, I also would encourage you to email the OVW Underserved email box if you want to ask about anything like in delve deeper. But from what I hear you saying, and it's really hard to say yes or no based on just what you're
Right.
saying, I don't want to answer you incorrectly. You can continue doing what you're doing and use the funding for it if it's in scope, as long as you're aware of what supplanting is.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, like I said, based on the fact that none of our staff are fully funded, then I don't think we would have a supplanting problem.
Great.
Okay, terrific. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Beth.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Daisy, next question?
That was the last question.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Once again, this recording will be uploaded onto our website in a couple of days. And if you have any additional questions, even if it's a clarifying question, and you go back and you watch this video or you don't want to watch this video again, just give us an email, ovw.underserved@usdoj.gov, and we'll be happy to help you with what we can.